You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glen Servati.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Cast. My name is Glen Servati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, where we like to do cool things with financial technology. Today we have an interview with Randy Salser, who I don't think the statute of limitations has run out yet for me to call him the new CEO of NACUSO. He stepped into that role in the latter part of 2025. He'll be sharing his thoughts on his first few months in that job, as well as his thoughts on the upcoming Reimagine conference, the annual event that NACUSO puts on this year in Orlando, Florida. So that'll be coming up in just a second. Before that, I'll remind you, you can always check out more about the Best Innovation Group by visiting our website, big-fintech.com. A lot of interesting things going on that you can find out more there as well. Our next CU Town Hall, if you've listened before, you're probably familiar with this routine. The next one will be on Wednesday, February 18th. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. It is free to join, but you do need to register in advance. We do have a guest speaker coming up this time, and I'll save that little detail for next week. But it's a great interactive conversation. It is intended to be interactive and lively. We like to open up the conversation to everybody who attends. But the idea is to discuss the most pressing issues that are facing the credit union world. And it's a group of leaders who have some great opinions and thought processes around best practices in that space. So again, cutownhall.com. You go out to that site. You can request an invitation if you're not already on our mailing list to receive an invitation. And while you're there, you can check out the replays of some of the past episodes as well. They tend to run about an hour, and they're great conversations. Another one coming up that I think you should take a quick look at is CU Unplugged. That's going to be a conference, or an unconference as we call it, taking place in San Francisco. Graciously offered up by Visa and their new Market Support Center at Mission Rock is going to be where that's taking place March 30th through April 2nd. This one, I think, is going to be really fascinating. It's intentionally kept small. We're going to be breaking out into groups. The real key of an unconference is it means it is unscripted. The agenda is not set in advance. As people get together the first day, and this is intended to be credit union leaders. Bring your thinking caps. Again, no passive participation here. We're going to decide what the most important topics to discuss are. We'll do some breakout groups so people can engage on the topics they find the most interesting. We'll be using AI to capture the notes and summarize, so even the sessions that you don't attend directly, you'll have access to the information. We've got some great thought leaders already lined up to be there. You can find out more by, this is being held jointly by the Defense Credit Union Council and Best Innovation Group. You do not need to be a member of the DCUC to participate. I want to make sure that's clear as well. And you can find out more about it by visiting the DCUC website, dcuc.org, or the Best Innovation Group website, or just go straight to the source, cu-unplug.com. Hope to see you there. Drop me a note as well. I'll be there, and I'm looking forward to it, as I said. A couple of the stories in the news this last week that I want to touch on before we get to our interview. Trump accounts. We've talked about these before. Newborn baby accounts for anybody born pretty much during Trump 2.0. It's anybody born, I guess, from the beginning of last year until the end of 2027, I believe is the way it's set up. I'm sorry, 2028, the end of the term. And I guess that will be then subject to renewal at some point. With $1,000 donated by, or automatically deposited by the government, which will then be growing in a low-risk, low-cost index fund, and then available to the newborn when they're no longer all that new, at 18 years of age, getting into the benefits of compounding with the opportunity for parents to make contributions along the way, as well as some matching contributions. We'll get to that in a second. A little bit more meat on the bone. Still not 100% clear exactly how this is all going to work, but announcement made this week. JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America were both on hand at the White House when some more details were given. They have both offered to match the initial $1,000 of donations for their employees. There's a whole bunch of companies that are standing up and saying they will do the same, mostly in the financial services industry. Coinbase, SoFi, Robinhood, Schwab, all saying that they will participate in this with matching funds. There's some other philanthropists who are also offering to match funds. So these balances are going to, suddenly propagate pretty quickly, it looks like. Hard to make an argument against this. Whether it's exactly the most efficient way of doing it, let's not get into picking nits. It's addressing a need that's out there, and it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. Credit union space, again, this is something America's credit union is looking at, because as you can see, there's not a credit union on that list right now of folks who have been talking about it. So how we will have an opportunity to participate in this one will be very important to be watching. So we'll continue to watch there. But here's the part that I thought was really interesting in the announcement this week. Visa has actually thrown their hat in the ring, specifically talking about they're going to create functionality so that rewards points, cashback rewards, can be deposited directly into these Trump accounts, which doesn't sound all that difficult from a technological standpoint, but it's an interesting shift, and I think a really savvy one, because that's to some extent found money for a lot of people. What a great way to actually put it away for the long term on a buy and hold basis, whether you're doing it in a Trump account or any other type of account. Also potentially very savvy because it's actually playing both sides of the fence here. Think about what else is going on that may be affecting Visa these days. That 10% credit card rate cap that's been floated in Congress that seems to be actually, people are kind of waking up and realizing it's not all that it's cracked up to be. But think about the fact that if you did go down the path of looking at a 10% rate cap, that is almost certainly going to impact the approach to rewards programs and the ability to earn cash back that you can deposit into those accounts. So this may actually kind of, again, create a bit of a wake-up call of exactly the unintended consequences of pursuing that angle. So interesting angle and kind of maybe three-dimensional chess from Visa standpoint. I found that one very interesting. Another one this week that really caught my attention, and I'll post a link to this one, an article that was, I think it's the CU Daily has the one that I'll provide the link to. A fintech company called Aven, A-V-E-N, has actually gotten a fair bit of press over the course of the last week or so as basically the benefactor that provided, I don't know what else to call it, but the seed capital to help get one of the new charters that were granted for a de novo credit union off the ground, the Haven Federal Credit Union with an H, not the same name as Avon. And the quotes I'm seeing, I haven't seen a precise dollar amount, but they say that they put up a few $1 million, as they put it, toward that cause. Again, fascinating stuff. We've talked to Denise Wymore, who's involved with CU De Novo, an initiative trying to get more of these little startups going. And she's taken a crowdsourcing approach in her organization in terms of understanding that the single barrier that I can see to the startup of new credit unions is raising that initial capitalization to have the equity to do it, and the necessary reserve that the NCUA requires. If you're doing it on a onesie-twosie basis, it takes a long time. On the other hand, unlike a community bank, there's not the return on investment proposition to actually put big dollar amounts in there. So now you've got a company like Avon that has put multiple millions of dollars into doing it. Great, that solves a problem. It's also really interesting to me because I'm trying to figure out, what does Avon get out of this? Avon, if you're not familiar with them, and I wasn't, is a credit card that is supporting the prime and super prime space. Basically, it essentially works like a HELOC in terms of offering the best terms and rates, supposedly, because it is specifically for homeowners, and their home is basically backing up that credit card. So what that means, they've made the comment, will Avon be, this new federal credit union, Haven Credit Union, be offering Avon products? The answer is only if they are deemed to be best in class. But it's hard not to wonder about a quid pro quo here. I'm also fascinated by the idea, the field of membership they're starting with. It's a multiple kind of field approach, but the main one is Santa Clara and San Mateo counties in the Bay Area, which is where Avon is based, Silicon Valley, but a low-income swath of about 300,000 residents there. You take the full San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, I just looked this up, where 2.7 million people live. So that's only about 10 to 12% of the overall population of those counties. They're looking at the low-income side. Again, if they're doing this on an altruistic basis, that's wonderful, because that's exactly what we need. it doesn't necessarily match with the capabilities, and especially in an area like that where anybody who is, lower income by definition is probably not able to afford their own home and isn't using Avon's products. So the matchup just seems to be a little bit interesting to me. I've already reached out. I'm hoping to have an interview with somebody who's involved in this initiative, hopefully out at GAC, where I think they're going to be on site. So I'm hoping to do that. But here's the one that really kicked me in the head is I went out and visited the Avon site and looked, and they have a very impressive board of advisors. When I clicked through on the About Us page at Avon, and the first person listed as an advisor to Avon is none other than a gentleman, you may have heard his name this week, Kevin Warsh, who has just been nominated as the new chair of the Federal Reserve. He's listed still there as a former governor, which he was from back about 10, 15 years ago or so. Something tells me Mr. Warsh may be a little busy and probably is not going to be able to continue to serve as an advisor to Avon, but we'll see about that. But like I say, kudos. I love the idea of a new credit union getting started. I love the idea of somebody providing $2 million or $3 million or whatever the dollar amount was to make that happen. I just like to understand a little bit more about it because it feels to me like an interesting loophole that maybe somebody may have just stumbled on that we haven't seen before. So stuff to follow up on, as always. Let's get back to our main event. Randy Salser joined NACUSO over the course of, I think he mentions that as we get into the conversation, not that long ago. And as I mentioned, he seems like the right guy for the job. As far as I can tell, this is a very, very good match for the organization that represents all the CUSOs in the space. Without any further ado, my conversation with Randy Salser. I'm here with Randy Salser, the CEO of NACUSO as of, I guess, October. You're still newly minted, I guess you would say, right, Randy?
Exactly.
So it's funny. I knew NACUSO was in the process of doing a search for a new CEO. And I, at the time, got to say, when I thought about, what NACUSO was looking to do, and I just thought, okay, who would possibly meet, I don't mean to embarrass you, but, who would meet that profile? I just could not even come up with somebody. And then we met at Venture Tech in November, but I'd heard about your appointment before then. And then as soon as I saw your resume, I thought, oh, this is exactly the kind of person they needed. So congratulations. And thanks so much for taking the time to talk.
Hey, Glenn, thank you. I've obviously followed you guys for a long time, all the way back like 10 years ago. You guys were working on some of the CU Ledger stuff. So I've always been downloading and watching and from afar. And so thank you so much and happy to be here.
Appreciate that as well. Well, let's touch base. I mean, your background, I guess I'm most familiar with your time at NACUSO. So if you could just mention what brought you kind of to the NACUSO world.
Sure. Yeah. So spent over a decade at NAFCU on the executive team there, got to work with a lot of great folks. And my role there was the for-profit subsidiary. So I got to work with all the partners like Allied and TrueStage and many, many others. And so when this role came up, I actually called, I think, a mutual friend of ours, John Ainsworth, and said, John, you should do this. This is a pretty cool company. I think they need a little focus and maybe kind of back to its roots. And but I think it's something to be really neat for you. And he laughed a little bit and kind of said, man, this is a role for you. And so I kind of stepped back for a second, said, I never really thought about that. And then went through, reached out to Jill at Humanity and a few other folks that I consider mentors in the space. And that led us to here. And so I'm excited to be a part of it. I think it's been a great organization for a long time and hopefully long into the future as well.
Well, let's step back and talk about NACUSO specifically. And obviously, you did your research before you signed on, but you were obviously very familiar with it before that as well. We'll assume our listeners are familiar with credit union service organizations or CUSOs, but I don't know that they necessarily understand exactly how broad that world and that ecosystem is. Can you say a bit about both? I don't know if you want to go at it just from the CUSO space overall or the NACUSO membership, but exactly how that looks in the overall credit union space.
Sure. It's one of the things I asked early on was how many CUSOs are there, right? Like it's let's start there from a foundation standpoint. And what's interesting about that is that used to be public data. It still is public data, but it's not reported out as quite as easy. So we'll reach out to the NCUA and get an idea of kind of like how many CUSOs are there, right? So I talked to some very smart people, far smarter than me, and they believe it's about 1,200 CUSOs out there. I've heard upwards of 1,500 and around 1,000, but I think there's about 1,200 CUSOs in the space. Best guess.
That's kind of the roughly the number I was thinking too. And the majority of them are allied in some fashion with NACUSO.
Certainly engaged, yeah, in one way or the other. So we've got a large membership, but our membership is based on credit unions and CUSOs, right? Some fintechs, some CUSOs, some that are fintechs and that are also CUSOs. But there's a lot that shared collaborative mindset is really where our focus goes back to, right? There's a lot of member business lending and traditional insurance CUSOs, shared service models, but there's also intellectual capital sharing that's super important in this space. And that's where some of the CUSOs really have gained some momentum is in this fintech landscape where you need data scientists or something that has much more granular expertise that maybe a $500 million credit union doesn't have on their strategic plan, a $250,000 a year data scientist. Some of those things can be leveraged in that CUSO model where data scientist works on 2 or 3 credit unions together, right? And they set it up in a CUSO format and they can do that. So there's just a lot of different ways to leverage that CUSO model. And our goal is to try to tell the story more, right? Like let people know that it's just another tool in the toolbox. Whether you go about utilizing a CUSO framework, let's at least make sure you know that it's an option so that when you are doing your strategic planning, is it something you should do using that CUSO framework, or is it something that stays internal at the credit union?
It's interesting because I mean, again, I'm not going to go as far as to say no two CUSOs are alike, but there's a lot of different flavors. I mean, you're kind of describing, well, first off, you've got, enormous ones like the old PSCU, Valera, and
Right.
folks like that. But you've got credit unions who may come together and say, hey, this is a real need. Let's band together and start one. But what I'm seeing more and more these days are the young startups that don't even necessarily start by thinking they're going to serve credit unions. They have no idea what a CUSO is. Then they start kind of doing their market research and their due diligence, and they say, this is a great partner opportunity. And by the way, it's also an opportunity to build some investor base too.
No,
So
you're
it's a
exactly right.
totally different angle.
Yeah, you're so right. And it's incredibly diverse market, like you said, right? You've got the giants like Origins and Valera, and then you have some of the credit unions that get together to do commercial business lending, right? And that's the piece that's so powerful is that there's a myriad of ways that you can utilize this tool, but making sure that you know about it is one of our goals.
And one of the things, like you say, and who, all the different people who do need to know about it. I know you're about to embark on a hike the hill in DC. I think the couple days after we're recording this, and it'll probably be in past tense by the time the people get a chance to hear this. But it's another one of those interesting things that it's a very necessary step to really help, the Hill understand what CUSOs are all about. What is kind of the key message? Well, first off, probably you start with what's a CUSO to some of the
Right.
folks. But what are the key messages you'd like to really leave behind with them?
Yeah, you nailed it. That's one of the pieces. We went in October, and so one of the things that was pretty glaring was there's no one really up there talking about CUSOs, right? You've got great folks at the leagues and America's Credit Unions and DCUC and the folks that are doing a lot of the talk about the tax exemption and NDAA or whatever the shiny object is at the time that they're trying to make sure that we keep in place. We weren't up there to talk about CUSOs, go into that environment, and the hot topic at that time was the Genius Act, right? So stablecoins
Hmm.
was the one thing that everybody wanted. Every office, like sending banquet leaders, Senate Majority Leader, anyone we spoke to, they all wanted to talk about stablecoins, and so we used that opportunity to tell the stories about CUSOs and whether they knew that stablecoins in and of themselves. Again, I'm not. If the credit union wants to use that tool, awesome. I don't know if it's great for them or not. That's for them to decide with their board and their strategic team. But if they want to embark upon issuing stablecoins, they can't do it through the credit union. They're not allowed. So if they want to issue stablecoins, they have to do it through the CUSO. So we talked about the 1% investment capital rule at that time to tell them about, particularly in the aggregate, right? So if they want any type of scale in the stablecoin world, there's not one credit union that could get enough scale to actually compete with the large players that are going to be in the stablecoin space, and they're already in the stablecoin space. So that 1% investment capital rule matters, particularly when I said like the aggregate, right? So if they do stablecoin, what are they not going to do? Are they not going to do an insurance CUSO? Are they not going to do a member business lending CUSO?
I
And
was
so
going
there
to
was a
say, if I can stop you for a second, that is, and I've been kind of picking up on that being one of the hot topics, talking to some other folks coming at it from the credit union space as an investor into a CUSO. Can you just back up and mention what that investment limitation is at this point? You mentioned 1%.
sure
What are we talking about?
1% of their assets, effectively their assets. It's a little more nuanced, but effectively they're unencumbered assets. So 1% gets pretty tight pretty quick if you
And
want to
that's
do it
across all of their CUSO investments,
in the
not just
aggregate.
for
Yeah.
one.
There's some state specific. Iowa and Texas have a little bit different. Florida is a little bit different, but effectively, yeah, in the aggregate, you can't invest over 1%. So you
So
can't
as
get into
stable
stable.
coins get hot, I mean,
Yeah,
that could be, it becomes either or pretty quickly, it sounds like.
very quickly. And so we talked about removing the cap and let our prudential regulators see if there's concentration risk. They're on a 12-month exam cycle. So the NCOA is in there. If they see any type of exam concentration risk, they'll address it. So we did a bunch of research on this, and Chairman Joanne Johnson back in 2005 actually brought this up to raise the cap from 1%, I think, to 3% at the time. It just never got passed through Congress for whatever reason. We can't really figure it out. But the 1% is just an arbitrary number. It's been 40 plus years. We're not exactly sure where that 1% came from. You and I know, being in this space for so long, there was probably some type of horse trading with the ABA or somebody that said, okay,
Mhm.
we'll just do 1%. It'll be fine. But it's not been looked at in 4 decades now. So we think you should eliminate it, but certainly at least raise it exponentially. And so they actually, when we were talking to the members, they said, "You guys have any draft language on this?" And so we went back and drafted some language, and so we'll be taking that back next week to talk to the NCUA about it, talk to members of Senate banking in a many different people. Have you done the hill hikes before? So we'll do the marathon of trying to find a sponsor for this bill. And of course, right after we went in October, I reached out to friends at America's Credit Unions and DCUC, have since connected with Brad at ACUL, and showed them, said, "Hey, you guys take a look at this. Tell me what you think. Like, let's do this together. It's a little bit different than playing defense on the tax exemption. Let's play a little offense on Capitol Hill for our credit unions and let them know that, hey, here's another tool in the toolbox that's gotten better." And so that's what we're going to try to do, is focus on the issues that affect CUSOs and credit unions, and then collaborate with America's Credit Union, DCUC, those folks on the tax exemption, but not spend our members' dollars on it, right? They do a great job at it. We'll support, we'll sign letters to Treasury or anything that they want us to support on, but let our focus be on the CUSO industry and how that affects credit unions.
It reminds me of a couple of different things. And I've heard a few other people mention this, that collaboration is like really, to a great extent, kind of your North Star that kind of drives the way you think about the process. And it sounds like that's a perfect example. How do you see it? Can you talk a little bit about, how you
Sure.
see the alignment with America's credit unions, et cetera?
Yeah, the best part is the willingness of everyone to sit down. Every person I've talked to now, look, I've been friends with Greg for a long time. I worked with them for many years, met Jason and become friends with him. I think that both incredibly bright minds, their staffs are great. The willingness to collaborate has been great. And the understanding that they're not doing that. They're not talking about CUSOs on Capitol Hill. They have a full plate when they go up there. So collaboration is huge for me, because the members of the Senate and House are going to just call America's Credit Unions and DCUC and say, "What do you guys think?" Right? That's how it works. They're not just going to say, "Hey, this guy came in from the CUSO and said we should do this. Let's do it." They're going to run the traps on their end and call Greg and call Jason and call Scott or Tony or Brad or whoever and see, make sure everybody's on the same page. So when we're able to go in there and say, we've spoken to our peers in this space, they're on board as well. Here's what we think is the right thing for our credit unions to be able to conduct their business and serve Main Street. That's ultimately what it's about. So the collaboration piece is a huge goal that my board is very adamant about. And so I'll certainly do it so I can keep my job. But I also believe in it pretty strongly. Obviously at my time at NAFCU and many times, like, I think that's the superpower of credit unions, is the collaboration and the
That
ability and
superpower
willingness
word,
to do it. Yeah.
that definitely came into my mind. It sounds like what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong, the alignment between the CUSO message and the credit union message, for the most part, is pretty solid. It's more a matter of the pieces that need to be amplified that are CUSO specific. Can you give kind of maybe some examples? I mean,
Sure.
would the credit unions also? I'm sure they agree with you, but that's just not at the top of their priority list to talk about that 1% threshold for investment.
It is on the table, but it's not the top one, right? Obviously, the tax exemption is always going to be there. But if we can enhance some of these tools in the toolbox, they're 100% aligned with it. And like our focus is really like that 1% investment capital rule, the 1225 member business lending cap, and third party vendor oversight. Those are the three things we concentrate on Capitol Hill. We tell stories around that, whether it's stablecoin, whether it's whatever else we're working on. But those are the focus that these credit unions and CUSOs and the vehicle that they use, which is a CUSO, to try to help them enhance how they serve Main Street. That's what all we're focused on.
So I think you mentioned you've just kind of hit the 90-day mark in your new
Yeah,
role.
yeah.
Any surprises, things that were different than you expected, things that you want to really double down on now that you've had a chance to kind of get a lay of the land?
No real surprises, just more like we've done a few of these smaller roundtables where with like our member business lending group and the willingness for them to share information and what's working, what's not working across what is appears to be competing uh, forces inside the space is invigorating to me. I love being in those rooms. I came from the insurance sector years ago, 20 plus years ago now, and we didn't share information with folks that were in the same space unless it was not good information. And so I just love getting folks together and being collaborative and sharing ideas and sharing what worked and what doesn't work and how can they create things together. There's been CUSOs that have started at the Reimagine conference that are, thriving today. We just see these great stories that come from sitting in a room with peers and talking about ideas. We talked about it before we even came on, this spontaneous dialogue that happens when you guys are talking about shared goals and shared challenges and shared ideas. It always works better when you're doing it together. It's just a different mindset, right? You can't see the forest through the trees, or whatever analogy you want to use. Is fresh minds and fresh ideas is fascinating to me. So no surprises, just more reinforcement that I'm so happy to be in this role and back working with directly with credit unions and CUSOs.
You mentioned Reimagine, and speaking of kind of getting in a room together, that's the annual event that takes place that NACUSO has been holding. I don't know how many annual cycles it's been. I believe the dates this year are April 27th to 30th
Yes,
in
sir.
Orlando, Florida.
That's correct.
Anything you can share about? I mean, my favorite piece of that is always the next big idea competition. I know that's going to be part of the agenda again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we have the next big idea competition working to build out the curriculum now. It's almost finished, starting off with more of that overview of CUSOs, great legends like Guy Messick and Dennis Dollar and folks that have been a part of this industry for a long time. Then we roll into the second day, which has some keynote presentations about AI with Trent from Google and or AWS, sorry, that has had a lot of experience with this AI. And then into the second day. Then we do the next big idea competition. Second day is more granular, right? You start doing breakout sessions that are specific to insurance CUSOs or member business lending CUSOs. And then the final day, working very hard with a great group of collaborators from Feline and Circle and Conquer and Converge, True Stage to give credit unions a bit of an insight into what's going on in this space with this CUSO world, where all of their accelerators, they all have different stages of fintechs in there. So we'll spend the morning doing some presentations of some of the folks that are going through the Feline Accelerator Program, the MDC Accelerator Program, Circles Accelerator Program, that then leads into more dialogue on a separate breakout session that has to do with, hey, how do you invest in CUSOs? How do you participate in this platform that is this CUSO environment if I don't have $10 million to invest in a fintech or $1 million or 100,000? Can I still participate in that? So some of that dialogue is exciting to be able to present to credit unions in one spot where they can see all of the fintechs that are going through these incredible minds at Feline and MDC and Reseda and Circle. They can see it in one spot, and then they can go either they could go to venture tech or they could go to Receiptus. They could go to a more granular one later if they wanted to, but they can see it all in one spot. They can get a sneak peek into what's going on in the industry right now and some of the new things that are coming out that these groups are all working to bring to credit union land, which is incredible.
So that's interesting because again, the next big idea competition, which I love, it is usually, I think it was at 3 or 5 companies that get on stage, not very many. But what you're saying there is that fourth day will actually have, another kind of lightning round of a lot more of those companies will be there. And again, NACUSO, this is intended, and the way you've just described it, clearly the purpose is to present these to credit unions. So it's the purpose. I don't know what the composition of the room is likely to be, CUSOs versus credit unions. I'm assuming you're looking for, a pretty healthy mix between the two.
Yeah, more credit unions, the better. Like we were talking about, is just learning what's going on with this CUSO vehicle, right? It's just another tool in the toolbox. And here's some of the things that are out there. So we thought that if we could showcase some of these incredible companies that all of these other fintech accelerators are working on, then we could show it to these credit unions and they could get a better understanding. Not that they don't, but like you said earlier, I mean, there's so much news and noise in this space. Where do you go? Like that's one of the things that we've worked hard to try to make it easy for credit unions to kind of see what's happening in one spot, even if it's just a small sample size, right? We have 50 different CUSOs, fintechs presenting that morning. Okay, if I want to do a little more, then we can talk about how do we engage? That sounds like a great new compliance CUSO or insurance CUSO. How can I engage a little more in that, right? Then you can go to the next stage. But even seeing what's out there is sometimes hard to do because where do you look?
Yeah. Well, if people want to find out more, we'll post links in the show notes. The Reimagine conference, you can get to it directly from the NACUSO.org site. Any other ways that you'd like to send people?
No, that's great. A link in the show notes will be great. They could click right on there and go. They could also go to reimaginenacuso.org. And but no, I forward to seeing everybody there, and I'm excited about the show.
Again, that's April 27th through 30th.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if it's technically a Disney property, but very near the Disney empire.
It's the Yacht Club at Disney. It's like 500 feet from Epcot's doors, so it's pretty close.
Well, Randy Salser, thanks so much. Looking forward to catching up with you again there. It's still a couple months off in the beginning of I guess that's more the tail end of the spring conference season when things get crazy. But I'm sure we'll have much more ground to cover between now and then.
That's right. Hey, thanks for having me on. It's always fun talking.
Thank you, Randy. So we have NACUSO Reimagine coming up, as I said, in Orlando, Florida at the end of April. We'll post a link to that. I will be there. I never miss it. The Next Big Idea, one of my favorite events out there. It's a busy week, too. It's the same week as Nacha Payments on the other side of the country. And I'm going to do something that I'm sure I'll regret by the time those days come up. But I'm going to try to hit them both, which is going to require missing a little bit of each and taking a red eye in between. But heck, those are two conferences that I feel very strongly are important not to miss. And I'm going to figure out a way to do it, by golly. With that, another episode of the Big Cast in the books. Again, my name is Glen Sarvati. You can find me via my firm, 154 Advisors. You can find me at the Best Innovation Group website, big-fintech.com. If you go to the media page, you will find a vast array of our past episodes. Lots of interesting people and interesting concepts that we've been dealing with over the course of the last few months. And much further back than that, I think we got over 500 episodes that are out there now. And we got more coming. We're hitting the road now, and there's going to be a lot of the on-site interviews that we do with interesting people showing up in the conference circuit. So you'll be hearing those over the course of the next few weeks. We've got an interview with Scott Simpson, the new CEO of America's Credit Unions. And we'll be following up about the GAC conference, which, as I mentioned before, I will be at. And if you will as well, please do give a holler. We love to track down folks and have in-person conversations as well. Tell us what you think of the podcast. Tell us what else you think we ought to be covering on the podcast. Again, mentioned before, cu-unplug.com. Check out the CU Unplugged conference. Love to see you there at the end of March. And hope to see you at the CU Town Hall, cutownhall.com. And that's a simple one. You don't have to leave your desk. And that's on Wednesday, February 18th, coming up, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. With that, my name is Glen Sarvati, and as always, thanks for listening.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big FinTech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.